I am Demario Davis, New Orleans Saints linebacker and Player Coalition Task Force member, and my co-host this afternoon is Aeneas Williams, Pro Football Hall of Famer and Players Coalition member. Players Coalition is an independent 501c3 and 501c4 organization that works with professional athletes, coaches, and team owners dedicated to improving social justice and racial equality in our communities. We are focused on 4 key pillars: police and community relations, criminal justice reform, education, and economic advancement. We have hosted district attorney forums across the country, including New York, Boston, Sacramento, Oakland, Maryland, and Virginia. This year, the countless stories of people suffering in overcrowded, unsanitary prisons and jails during the coronavirus and numerous incidents of police violence have highlighted the need for massive criminal justice reform. There is, however, no one answer or solution. The problem is far too big and the solutions are complex. We do know that we need changes at every level of government if we are actually going to have a system that helps us not harm our communities. Far too long, tough on crime police policies launched under the guise of protecting citizens have led to mass incarceration and mass supervision that have caused profound harm to the most vulnerable in our Black people and low-income people. We at the Players Coalition believe that the community as a whole is better served and protected through a new approach to criminal justice that provides people with second chances, that does not punish poverty, and which holds police accountable when they cause harm. We are committed to working towards making that a reality. One of the main areas that we focus on is prosecutorial accountability. The prosecutor, more than perhaps any other government official, has the power to shape and change criminal justice policy. By using their discretion, prosecutors decide who gets charged and what they get charged, and make sentencing recommendations to a judge. The DA can determine whether or not police are held accountable, whether kids are going to be treated like kids, whether people are kept in cages just for being poor, and whether we are going to continue to resort to punishment even when the evidence overwhelmingly shows that more incarceration is not actually going to keep our community safe. Now, New Orleans voters have a choice about who will be their next district attorney. You will hear from them today, and we hope this will educate voters on their positions, similarities, and differences, and prepare voters to go to the voting booth. We will present questions to panelists for discussion, and each candidate will have up to 90 seconds to give what we expect will be in-depth, detailed answers to each question. Each candidate will also have 60 seconds for an opening statement and 60 seconds for a closing statement. If time permits, we will incorporate community questions at the end. Please put those Q&A questions in the section, put those in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. Aeneas, you're on mute.
Thank you, Demario. Before we get started, hey man, you buried the lead. Congratulations to our Saints, right? Before we get it started with all this politics, right? Great job with you and the team. And as I introduce the candidates, I get excited because I'm a native New Orleanian, grew up in the 17th Ward, Holly Grove, or actually not Holly Grove, close to Holly Grove. Grew up with great parents. My uncle, as well as a number of cousins, all were incarcerated at one time or another. So this particular position under Senior Harry Connick played an important role in a lot of my family. So I take this very serious, and I'm so glad we as the Players Coalition have an opportunity to converse with each of the candidates. And the candidates are Judge Kiva Landrum, Judge Arthur Hunter, Judge Morris Reed, and City Councilor Jason Williams. We're thankful to have all 4 candidates here today. Thank you guys for joining us. You're welcome. Before we get into the questions, we will begin with a short opening statements from each candidate. Beginning with Judge Hunter, you each have 60 seconds, and then after Judge Hunter, it will be Judge Landrum, then Judge Morris Reed, and finishing with City Councilor Jason Williams. Thank you. Let's get started.
Yeah, thanks for the Players Coalition for putting this together. It's very important. I'm Arthur Hunter. I was a judge for 23 years in criminal district court. I'm a former New Orleans police officer. And I know if we want to be a safer city, then we need a district attorney who's going to hold people accountable for their actions, reduce recidivism, and prosecute cases fairly and accurately and professionally without the lawsuits and the drama. And this is what I would do. If you have a behavior disorder or a drug opioid addiction, or if you're a veteran, I'm going to use my experience as a mental health court judge, veterans treatment court judge, and reentry court judge, and place those people in those specialty courts to receive the treatment services they need. I'm going to use my experience as a police officer to create a special crimes unit with the NOPD, and we're going to target the violent criminals and the drug gangs who are not only killing each other, but they're harming and killing innocent people as well. And even though I was a police officer, as an attorney and a judge, I've held police officers accountable for misconduct. And we're going to work with juveniles and with young kids. And I'm not just going to deal with what they did, but why they did it. And so we're going to make sure that we support that family, put that child on a positive path, and make that first crime the last crime. And I'm going to use common sense. I'm not going to prosecute possession of marijuana cases. Instead, I'm going to use those limited resources for more serious crimes. It's legal in almost half the states. It's even legal here in Louisiana for medical purposes. And why give a young person a criminal record just for smoking weed? And so that concludes my opening, and ready to take on and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Judge Landrum.
Good afternoon, and thank you all so much for hosting this forum. I am Kiva Landrum. I am a New Orleans native. I was born and raised in New Orleans East. However, my family roots are all over this great city, from uptown to Algiers as well. Immediately after law school, I went to work in the district attorney's office, knowing that in order to save this system and to make changes to it, it was going to be important to learn the system from within. So I have under my belt experience as a young prosecutor with over 100 judge and jury trials. When our elected prosecutor stepped aside in 2007, I was asked by our local community and business leaders to step up and act in his place, becoming the first female to ever act as a district attorney in the state of Louisiana. And it was because of my experience and my integrity that I was asked to step up and do this job. And then I later went on and ran for judge in criminal district court, where I've been for the past 12 years until I stepped aside to make this run for our district attorney's office. As the chief judge in criminal court, I spearheaded efforts on ROR bail reform and lowering our jail population on nonviolent low-level offenders to the lowest New Orleans has seen in its history. And it is that kind of work that I plan to do as our next district attorney. I envision criminal justice reform that also protects and promotes public safety, knowing that we have to reform our bail system, knowing that we need to hold our police and prosecutors accountable when they are wrong, making sure that we expand programs and link people to the services that they need in our community, and also making sure that we expand services as it relates to our juveniles and their families. And so that is the work that I want to do, using transparency and accountability as a tool for criminal justice reform and as a tool for justice in our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Judge Morris. Is Judge Morris there?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
All right. Morris Reed. I have over 40 years of experience in the criminal justice system. I just don't talk about what I plan to do, but I ask voters to look at my record, my track record as a detective with the police department, a special agent with the Drug Enforcement Administration, working on high-level drug importation cases, with dope coming into our communities from overseas, as a first director of the Office of Municipal Investigation, created by the Honorable Dutch Demario, who called upon me to come into the city and clean up police brutality incidents on the part of rogue police officers, even to the point of investigating cops who did a midnight ride by a Dutch house and painted racial epithets on his garage door and assaulted his family. I was the first director of OMI. We got the police brutality rate down below the national average. I have over, I said, 40 years of experience working in the civil rights arena. I'm the past president of the New Orleans branch of the NAACP. I have marched with the national president from Birmingham to MLK Monument in Washington, D.C., protesting mass incarceration by the prison industrial complex. I am tired of the carnage that I see in our community, but I know when you close your school system, pump unlimited amounts of drugs into your community, unlimited amounts of weapons into your community, turn off the lights in the parks, have no outlets for young Black males, they're going to resort to gang violence to maintain and continue the drug flow in this community. And that is what happened. The district attorney in our community has not fired a round in the war against drugs. The district attorney has been incarcerating young Black males in untold numbers for minor drug offenses, user amounts. No major drug offenders go to prison in this community in the last 40 years. It is shameful that we're still under a consent decree by the Justice Department in a city with the majority Black elected officials community. I am in this race, push the envelope, draw attention to what has to be done to change the culture of the district attorney's office for the last 40 to 50 years, bum rapping Black youth, imprisoning them in Angola and Hunts Correctional Institute, to plantation-like penal institution that does nothing but create recidivists, and the cycle starts all over again. I have a plan that I instituted in 1996 to cure the ills of the DA's office that still exists today. And the plan that I devised in 1996, unfortunately, is still applicable today. Thank you very much, and I look forward to discussing the issues with you during this course.
Thank you, Judge Reed. And to close us out, City Councilor Williams.
Thank you, sir. And Morris Reed is absolutely right. The DA's office has been guided by a win at all cost culture that prioritizes high conviction rates and harsh sentencing over more effective approaches that have proven to reduce crime. As DA, I will replace that culture that seeks victory for prosecutors with one that seeks justice for victims and the accused alike. I have a long track record of delivering progressive reform to our criminal legal system. I'll talk about that later. Right now, I want to talk about what I would do as DA. I am committed to transforming the office into an anti-racist office. I will stand up to police misconduct by implementing new policies, ending racial profiling, ending police brutality. I will reject all cases built on racial profiling. I will end mass incarceration by ending the criminalization of poverty, addiction, mental illness, and sex work. I will also confront the sins of the past by creating a civil rights division that will work with federal authorities to aggressively pursue charges against any police officer who hurts, lies, or cheats in the name of the law, including past investigations that were dropped. I will reinvestigate cold murder cases. Too many Black and brown people have been murdered and their killers have never been identified or held accountable because we failed to solve crime in poor neighborhoods. I will immediately create a special conviction integrity division dedicated to rooting out and exposing evidence that might allow an innocent person to go free. Simply put, as DA, I will reimagine and redesign a system that will work fairly for every single person in the city of New Orleans.
Thank you, Councilor Williams. As we move forward to get into the discussion questions, I want to also make reference to my parents, Lawrence and Lillian Williams, and my two older brothers, Malcolm and Achilles Williams. And the reason why this panel is so important to me, my parents played the role of keeping me and my brothers from having to come in contact with your office. But many of our youngsters don't have that guidance, don't have that sibling leadership. So I am excited to hear not only about the prosecution, but what's better for the young man like myself who shoplift. I can only imagine if I had ended up in trouble and if I had a district attorney who was more guided toward prosecution versus what's best for the community as well as the young person who made the mistake. With that being said, all of you have run on platforms that promise some manner of criminal justice reform, but you don't all agree on the degree or scope. We hope to flesh out the discrete areas where there is a disagreement among you, and we'll be given each 90 seconds to answer each question. First, I want to talk about police accountability, which is at the forefront and center of the national conversation. We've seen too many people of color, Black Americans, die at the hands of law enforcement, and few have been held accountable. The first question, there's always going to be tension between asking a local prosecutor to rely on the local police department to prosecute cases while also asking them to hold abusive officers accountable. What steps do each of you plan to take to change how police are held accountable in the office? And what specific steps are you planning to take to make sure the community feels as if every time there is a process in place that is consistently and fairly applied? Can we start with you, City Council Williams?
Absolutely. I believe, based on my experience on the city council and overseeing the consent decree that the police department is over, it is very clear that outside pressure is what improves the culture and policies of local law enforcement. Number one, I will not hesitate to prosecute officers for abuses when appropriate. Number two, I will maintain that pressure for reform by properly screening and refusing cases that involve abusive or discriminatory actions by police. I will proactively notify the NOPD leadership of any problematic reports or other evidence of questionable police work, as I believe that is what's called for. We need someone to start grading the papers and police reports of these police.
Thank you. Judge Morris.
Has about 90%. Is that my time?
No, I'm sorry, it got disconnected. You could finish your point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. The current DA right now is accepting about 90% of cases that come across his desk. And when he does that, he's essentially committing to accepting and prosecuting a number of bad cases that involve unconstitutional arrests, and that encourages bad behavior that we're legally sworn to fight. That pattern of blind case acceptance that has existed for the past several decades is the gateway for even more egregious law enforcement behavior, like the knee on the back of Mr. Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. I will root out the small and large police infractions and prosecute whenever necessary.
Thank you. Judge Morris Reed.
I was a chief of the Civil Rights Division for the U.S. Department of Justice, the U.S. Attorney's Office. I was the second Black assistant U.S. attorney into that office after Dutch Moriel, who was the first, and he wasn't chief of the Civil Rights Unit. I prosecuted cops all over the metro area and sent them to prison for police brutality. No other candidate can say this. I have over 40 years of experience in investigation and prosecuting rogue police officers and organized crime figures. We came into a culture of the police department in the 60s, before the Civil Rights Bill, where police officers, when they shot and killed a Black man, was awarded a baked ham at one of the most popular restaurants on Padres near Chapatula Street. The restaurant is still there. If a white cop killed a Black man prior to 1965 in New Orleans, and maybe afterwards, he was given a ham, a baked ham. And that was a well-kept secret within the ranks of the police department. When I got out of police academy and went to my first roll call, it was less than 100 Black cops on the beat then. Every white cop in the precinct refused to ride with me. That's how segregated it was. We have to change the culture in this town. And unfortunately, when Black folks was shot and killed by police in this town, in my early days in the civil rights struggle, prosecuting cops, no Black elected official would stand up publicly and denounce it. They were afraid. When you go uptown and take white folks' money, you can't come back downtown and be independent and represent the people. It's not a popularity contest. You're going to be ostracized. by many among your colleagues with the bar, but you have to stand strong, and that's what I did in prosecuting rogue cops, and that's what I would do as your DA. You need a civil rights division in the DA's office. You need a community relations division within the DA's office to relate to people. When I grew up, we considered the police officers to be occupiers in our community. They weren't officer friendlies because most of them were white and they were racist. We have to change the culture in this community, and you're going to need someone who's courageous enough to do it. As my fighting racist white cops in this community and send them to prison and dealing with a racist district attorney's office, I didn't have any colleague among these contenders seeking the office of district attorney. It is not a popularity contest. We can't put a politician in that office and expect when controversy come up, they're going to stand strong. And believe me, controversy will come up, given the culture of police brutality and persecution of the disadvantage in this community. And you're going to have to be strong and courageous and stand up and do what's right for the people. I'm committed to doing that. My track record shows that I've done that.
Thank you, Judge Reed. Judge Landrum.
Thank you. As our next district attorney, I stand committed to leading the efforts of reform to protect our citizens from abusive police action. And that means first and foremost, setting up an independent unit that when we have allegations of police misconduct, that unit that will be staffed with seasoned prosecutors and independent investigators will investigate those cases and hold police officers accountable with integrity and transparency, and be able to at least share that information with our New Orleans community, connecting and healing this disconnect with the office and the New Orleans citizens. Moreover, my office is going to collect data, also record complaints of officer misconduct so that we can reject any cases that are built on officer misconduct, reject cases where officers are profiling our citizens, and share this information through our data sharing and collection with the New Orleans citizens. I am the only candidate in this race that as a prosecutor has held police officers accountable in criminal district court. I had a case where a police officer was sexually abusing citizens in our city. I took that case to court, stood with victims, and it was a very difficult case, and that police officer was held accountable for his misconduct in the line of duty. And it is that strength, that courage that I am going to make sure that I continue to exhibit as our next district attorney to protect any and all citizens from police officer misconduct.
Thank you. Demario.
Thank you, brother Aeneas. As we get ready
I'm sorry, Aeneas.
I'm sorry. I missed. I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry.
No
I apologize, Brother Hunter.
No,
yes.
No problem.
Please.
Aeneas, this is what I did. You know, I was recruited by the local head of NAACP to join the NOPD because they were looking for African-American males and females with college degrees to join the department. And I was assigned to a community policing unit. And shortly after I left the police department, I filed a major police brutality lawsuit against the city of New Orleans and the NOPD and 3 police officers for using a stun gun on a young African-American man. And as a result of that investigation, those 3 officers were indicted by a grand jury. One of those officers was convicted of aggravated battery. That's what I did as an attorney. When I became a judge, you know, I found in 2007, when a number of undocumented immigrants were here in New Orleans and rebuilding our city, and many of them were Latino, I found that NOPD was profiling Latino undocumented immigrants and really asking them for their papers of whether or not they were citizens. You know, just most recently, before I left the bench, in the French Quarter Police Task Force, you know, I had 2 cases in which I found the NOPD were racially profiling African-American males in the French Quarter. And I found no probable cause in that case. And as a result, those officers are on investigation. The unit has been disbanded. And, you know, Judge Landrum just mentioned a case in which he held a police officer accountable. I was the judge who sentenced that police officers to 35 years in Angola. And so I've done the work, and I'm going to continue to do that work as the next district attorney.
Thank you. Before I turn it over to you, Demario, I have a question for each of you guys. If you can answer it just succinctly in what few seconds. Why does it appear all 4 candidates are people of color, African Americans? Why has it appeared throughout the country when we see some of this discrimination, injustices, it's happened under the ostrich and under the leadership of leaders that were African American and people of color? Why do you think that's the case when we have people of color in leadership, but still seem to have some of the same challenges, even when the leadership is African Americans? Yes, starting with you, Mr. Hunter.
Well, it's not just about electing African Americans to be political office holders. It's also about making sure you elect the right African American leaders to be political office holders. Because, you know, Morris Reed just mentioned earlier, you have to have the courage to make controversial decisions, and I've done that, you know, my entire 23 years as a judge, and I made those controversial decisions regardless of political consequences. And so you have to realize it and make sure that you elect someone who just doesn't talk the talk, but who's walked the walk. And you look at what they've done. And you look at what they've done when they had the opportunity to do something. And you ask about them, and you ask about people in the community, how they are, what they did for people in the community. And so we really have to hold our elected officials accountable. And we can do it every 4 years. We can do it every 6 years. But again, you have to have the courage to make those right decisions regardless of political consequences, and have the courage to do the right thing.
Thank you, Judge Hunter. Judge Landrieu.
Thank you. You know, it is about not just who you are, but it is about the work that you do and your commitment to the community that you serve. And, you know, my entire career, I have committed to the people of New Orleans and being a public servant. When I was asked to be our district attorney in 2007, it was at a time when the office was faced with extreme turmoil and instability. And I stepped up to stabilize the office during that time. And that is what I know is critical here. We are faced with another critical juncture for criminal justice reform in our city. And it takes a leader that understands, but more importantly, has the experience of stepping up during a critical time and making tough decisions. And also one who has been connected to the New Orleans community. And I've dedicated myself through community service with programs such as the Roots of Music, Cafe Reconcile. And so it is about someone who is connected to the New Orleans community, both in the work that they do and in the work that in their volunteer work.
Thank you. Judge Reed?
First of all, we have to agree what police brutality and police abuse is. Police abuse and brutality is a 17-year-old black boy being shot off the back of a motorbike when a cop said he's gonna kill him a nigger that night. Who was also the son of a black police detective. Police brutality is a black mother, 6 months pregnant, being slaughtered in her bathtub, nude, crying out and begging for her life. I'm not talking about when the police department seeks it's convenient to prosecute a black cop for his sexual exploitations of prostitutes or his girlfriends. That is not the type of police brutality that's been plaguing this community. That's not the type of police brutality that gets you national notoriety of being in one of the most brutal police community environments in the country. That we had that under Demario. Why does black leaders find themselves compromised? When you go uptown and you take folks' money, conservative elements, and you come back downtown, you can't govern independently. Dutch left his independence on the table uptown. When he got ready to name a police chief, folks who gave him campaign contributions said, we want to pick Jim Parsons. You know who Jim Parsons was? The lieutenant under Bull Connors when Dr. King was marching in Birmingham, Alabama. That's who was Dutch Moriel's first police superintendent. And what did Parsons give us? He shut his eyes and allowed 2 hit squads to go out and kill 6 black young people one weekend looking for the kill of a white cop. And we was the subterfuge. Today, they have never prosecuted the true killer, and it was rumored to be another white cop over a drug deal as a result of those young people being murdered. No one was prosecuted. No one has served any jail time for the murder of 6 blacks one weekend. A rampage with all killer cops. Every cop in the lineup to go out there to conduct those raids had killed citizens before. And believe me, all right.
Thank you, Judge Reed. City Councilor Jason Williams.
Mr. Williams, I would tell you what the Last Poets is, an old song by the Last Poets. It says, sometimes when it is time to stand up, certain folks find a convenient way of sitting down. When you speak out against injustice, sometimes you have to speak out against powerful people, and people don't want that backlash. And people sometimes are worried about their next judicial election, or they're worried about their friendships. I'm the only candidate that spoke out against Leon Canizero when he was throwing rape and domestic abuse survivors in jail, when he was issuing bogus subpoenas and putting our children in adult population. And when I did that, he had a 75% approval rating. And he launched and he helped to launch an investigation against me, against charges I have to fight. Nobody wants to go through that. But standing up and fighting for what's right isn't always at a convenient time, and it comes at a cost. And I think a lot of people don't want to pay that cost. Black police, Black prosecutors, Black judges have hurt us as much as white folks in those same positions.
Thank you. Demario.
Thank you guys for that. Let's transition a little bit. Let's move on to cash bail and pretrial incarceration. A little transparency. The reason why I'm so passionate about cash bail, when I was in college in 2008, like Aeneas mentioned, I got in trouble for shoplifting, but I did get locked up. I was arrested and taken to jail. And if it had not been for my coach posting my bail, which was $10,000, I don't know at that time if I had seen a number on paper that large, and it was being accounted to me. My mother, bless her soul, great woman, but wasn't going to be able to afford that for her son, who she would have did anything for. And now realizing, having learned this much information, how that could have drastically changed my life had I not been in the setting that I was in, being African American, but being on a football team where the coaches could pay my bail because I was a scholarship athlete, which drastically saved my life. So I'm very passionate about this, and I'm interested to hear your points. Things that we know is reliance on cash bail effectively criminalizes poverty and imprisons people merely because they cannot afford to pay for their freedom, while lining the pockets of bail bonds industries. People are presumed innocent, yet in this state, on average, about 12,000 people are held in local jails each day, presumed innocent, because they cannot afford bail. Pre-trial detention can cause innocent people to plead guilty, and even short stays in jail can have devastating consequences. People lose their jobs, their homes, and fall behind on their bills. Question to the floor: when, if ever, do any of you believe cash bail is warranted? Put it differently, do you think cash bail protects public safety in any way? And we'll start with you, Judge Landry.
So what I know is that the cash bail system that we currently have desperately needs reform. And so what that means is that we have to find a system that is going to, first of all, ensure fairness and equity to everyone, but also protect public safety. Now, as our district attorney, my plans are, because I know that when I take office on January 1, the current bail system is going to still be in effect. And so it will not have been changed. And so it's going to be important to, number one, find a way to find fairness and equity within the system that we currently have until we change it. And so as our DA, I'm going to first and foremost not stand in the way of any ROR releases that the court gives. Also, not stand in the way of any nominal bonds that are set on low nonviolent offenders. It is going to be my position that we utilize verified risk assessment tools that I know account for the fact that Black people have more contacts with the police. And so we need a tool that also takes that into account on violent offenders, and that we then bring to the court what is the risk of threat that someone may pose to the public safety when they are being assessed. What it is going to take is this: all of us, everyone in the criminal justice sector, is going to have to come together and go to Baton Rouge and change these bail laws so we can enact laws that are fair and just and ensure public safety. As the Chief Judge of Criminal District Court, I spearheaded the movement to make sure that we had an ROR bail reform program in the court, where we are more aggressive in making sure that everyone that we could release, we released on ROR bonds, but also aggressive on everyone we could release on nominal bonds, low-level nonviolent offenders, that we did that as well. And that was with a lot of pushback from people in our community. But because I knew it was the right thing to do, that I made sure that we stood by it, and that it is something that is still in existence because it is what needed to happen and continues to need to happen in our community.
Thank you. Judge Morris Reed.
I marched in the summer of 2015 with the national president, NAACP, from Birmingham to MLK Monument in DC, protesting the prison industrial complex. The cash bail system is one aspect of it. It needs to be outlawed, needs to be discontinued. Why? Our system of justice here in the South is based upon over-policing the most impoverished neighborhoods, and that's usually is Black. Our police system is based upon vigilantes and night riders and slave catchers who return their prisoners to the plantation. When you after Reconstructions, when a Black free slave didn't have employment, there was a series of laws passed in the South by constructionists who said if you standing around, you don't have a job, and you're not doing anything, you could be charged with loitering. Still on the books today. And what happens? Well, you were given back to the plantation owners to work off your fine or fees. And we've carried that over to setting up a cash bail system and today's criminal justice system. Do you know that you can invest in prison incarceration in this country on Wall Street? Just invest in one of the national security companies like Wackenhut, who's doing prison management and being paid by the federal government. You can get dividends off folks being incarcerated. And a lot of them are incarcerated. Over 60% in Louisiana have some type of mental problem or high school dropouts. So you see, those are feeders to the prison industrial complex, and we have to start dismantling it. We can have individuals bound over for trial with third parties stepping forward, being their guarantor. We can have ankle bracelets and have folks confined to their residence. They don't have to be incarcerated. Why put them in the cubicle in the house of detention? Why? Because it's money making. If you had the cigarette contract for New Orleans City Jail Correctional Center, you could educate all of your kids at Harvard through Harvard University, because 98% of the prisoners incarcerated there, Judge Hunter can tell you, are avid smokers, smoking more than 1 pack a day. If you had the telephone and video conferencing contract, you could educate your kids through the Ivy League University, because everybody want to call home and talk to mom and talk to their children and talk to their girlfriend. It is a business that the United States should get out of, because we incarcerate more individuals in the Western civilization countries in the world. It's shameful.
Thank you. Thank you. Counselor Williams.
Let me be very clear. To answer your question, cash bail does not make us safer in any way. Harvey Weinstein could post any bond that was set on him, but he still was a predator up until the point that he was sentenced. And so I will have a formal policy of not just not fighting it, but I'm going to recommend no bond releases. I'm going to recommend RORs, because the vast majority of people in our local jail have not even been convicted of a crime. They're simply there because they can't put a couple $100s together to post a bond. And Judge Reed is right. It is morally shameful, and it has to end. And I will, as Andre 3000 said, even Stevie Wonder got to come from behind the piano sometimes. I'm going to get outside of court and outside of South White Street to champion reforming the bail system. Because as it sets right now, is it extracting large sums of money from the poorest communities in our city, and it is costing us all ridiculous sums just to house them in jail. So I will ensure that we use other alternatives. We can do monitorings, we can do check-ins, and I've already started this work on the city council. I wrote the legislation for municipal bail reform that got hundreds of people out of jail. The other piece is I created a dashboard that let the public see who was sitting in jail because they simply could not afford $1,000 to get out. And the public was shocked that people for stealing a candy bar or hedge clippers was literally sitting in jail, and they were paying for every meal and housing for them while they were waiting trial. And I would have a formal policy and an outside work on the soapbox of fighting money bail at every age.
Thank you. And Judge Hunter.
I agree with what everyone has said here, but this is what I've done. Over my 23 years, I've released a number of people on their own recognizances, and I've set bonds where people can afford to set their bond, especially in nonviolent cases. But this is what I'm going to do as a district attorney. I'm going to argue before the judge at an initial appearance or at the bond hearing. If the person is a danger to the community, that person should remain in jail. If the person is not going to return to court for further proceedings, the person should remain in jail. Other than that, I'm not going to object if a judge and a defense attorney, or if a judge wants to RR someone or release someone on their own reconnaissance, especially in those nonviolent cases as well. And look, I'm also going to join with defense attorneys as well. If it's a nonviolent offense, that person is working, the person can't afford the bond, I'm not going to object to an RO bond by a judge. I'm going to be more concerned that my assistant district attorneys are prepared to present a case before the judge and jury.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. To be respectable of time, let's move to juvenile justice. So a report from earlier this year, ordered by the city council, reached a troubling conclusion that kids in New Orleans experience trauma at rates higher than people returning from war. But we saw under Canizaro that when these same kids then act out or commit delinquent behavior, prosecutors reacted by often punishing them like adults. We know kids are impulsive. We know kids' brains are still developing. We know subjecting a kid to criminal justice system can have dire, irreversible consequences. First, as a district attorney, what specific efforts will you be willing to undertake to keep kids out of the criminal justice system in the first place? What, for example, will you do to make sure kids who may misbehave in school are kept in school? What alternative solutions will you implement to keep kids out of the system in the first place? Let's go in reverse order and start with you, Judge Hunter.
Well, one of the things I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure that that child's first crime is his last crime. And so we're going to bring everyone together, that child who's ever taken care of that child, my assistant district attorney, the child's attorney, a social worker, someone from that child's school, and maybe even a psychologist. And we're going to use restorative justice principles to create a plan, a holistic plan for that child, and deal with any issues within the home as well. Whether those issues deal with mental health, whether they deal with drug addiction or a lack of parenting skills. And so we're going to not just tell that child what the child cannot do, but also we're going to offer positive paths for what the child can do. Now, I've talked to Calvin Mackey about offering STEM resources and other people about offering art, music. So I know if we can find something positive for that child to do, that first crime will be the last crime.
Thank you. Councilor Williams?
Mario, we commissioned that report at the city council because I have been committed to breaking the school to prison pipeline. I have done things myself, and I have watched my juvenile court for today. My office is going to be committed to addressing the root causes of delinquency, specifically knowing what we know about PTSD. 33% of our young people have PTSD. So what I'm going to do is address the root causes by providing intervention services in court and do a comprehensive needs assessment of what is going on with that young person and also what's going on in their home. Oftentimes, there's an issue in their home that has them out past curfew. And in dealing with the case referred to my office, I will always make a trauma-informed screening decision to decide whether they should even be prosecuted, because some of them should not be prosecuted. I will have a trauma-informed needs assessment as well as wraparound care being the standard for that young people. Now, there's another piece of this. I'm going to also go to schools, which I've been doing for quite some time, and meeting with educators and administrators to try to convince them to take the police out of schools and to encourage them to deal with penalties for young people who mess up inside of the school system. And I'm going to help them create ways of dealing with that so they don't have to come to juvenile court. And the other piece of that is using restorative justice, because it deals with the young person based upon their current brain development. We cannot treat our young people like little adults. And that's what we've done for a very long time. I will never transfer a young person from juvenile facility to adult facility, ever. I will never prosecute a young person as an adult. I will handle everything in juvenile court or in that school.
Judge Morris Reed.
As one of our contemporary rappers said in one of his recent, well, last year release, I believe it was, say, I'm not new to this, I'm true to this. I started off working in the Feed the Young People breakfast program for a local nonprofit called Total Community Action. We know that kids going to school hungry could not eat. And I was in high school at the time in the Lower Ninth Ward, documented, received citations for it, and it hangs on my wall today. Very proud of that voluntary work. I have an undergrad degree in master's in sociology, minor in criminology. And that's what my primary emphasis is on, the sociological side, preventing individuals from getting involved in criminal activity to begin with, trying to rescue kids. I'm the fourth of 12 children. My father was a Baptist deacon, bless his soul, and my mother a homemaker. But rooted in a deep Southern tradition, I know that we can make our community better if we reach down and try to lift another brother, disadvantaged brother up. I went to the school system and asked the principal to give me his potential truants. And those are the ones I brought back to my court and started a junior judge program with certified instructor teaching in the evenings and helping those kids, most of them latchkey kids, on the weekend, receive national recognition for it. Took them to hunts in Angola and let the prisoners talk to them and give them reasons why they didn't want to have to be back in Angola hunts caged up like animals, because it's a terrible condition to be in. Took them to the morgue and took them to Charity Hospital, let them see bullet-ridden individuals, their contemporaries, and what happens when you mess around with guns and drugs in the street. And we had them to feed the hungry, to develop some humility so they can live in society and be polite to their elders and do unto others as they would like to have done unto them. That is walking the walk and not just talking the talk. And that's what I plan to do as your DA. We're going to have a district attorney junior DA program in that office. The lights are going to be on in the evening and on the weekend. Every assistant DA is going to be required to take a trip up the highway and tour hunts in Angola and see what's happening up there, so they know not to fabricate evidence against individuals and send them to prison unjustly. We're going to have a code of conduct, and we're going to have a prosecutor's manual that never had one before in this office. Those are the things that I've done before, and those are the policies I institute when I become the DA in New Orleans.
Judge Landrum.
Thank you. You know, in my free time, which I don't have much of it, but I do commit myself to an organization that deals with kids in our community. And it's a music organization that, you know, teaches kids music education. But I also tell people that based on the nature of the work that we do there, it is also a crime prevention organization. And that is not our primary focus, but that is the indirect effect that we have because of the positive effects that we have on the kids that we serve in the roots of music. And so this is the type of thing that we have to do as a community. And it means, number one, addressing the public health issue of juvenile trauma, bringing those services to our children wherever they are, whether it be at the home, at the school, or at these outside activities. Also making sure that we utilize every alternative to prosecution for our kids. And that means using community-based diversion programs that link us with the services in our community to help treat not only the child, but the families, providing whatever resources and whatever support that we need to provide to those families. And also meeting our kids where they are, whether that means bringing those services to their schools, to their homes, to these outside activities. You know, our primary focus and mine as our district attorney is going to be to heal our kids so that in fact, then we heal our communities. And that is the only way that we're going to get this right.
Thank you. And then my final question would be, Counselor Williams committed to never sending a child to adult court or prison. I want to give him a chance to speak to that even more, to make sure that that's what he's committing to. And I would also ask, will you other candidates commit to never sending a kid to adult court? And if not, what circumstances do you think warrant sending a child to adult court where that child could wind up in Orleans Parish Prison or Angola? Counselor Williams, we'll begin with you, and then we'll go to you, Judge Morris Reed.
I can't hear the councilman.
Okay, thank you, Judge. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I am committed to that. It is in writing on my website. It will be in writing on my website, and every ADA working for me will sign off on a contract, understanding what these policies are. And a lot of folks like to point to, well, what if it's a particularly bad or horrific crime? It doesn't change the brain development of the young person. And I believe, number one, everything can be handled in the juvenile system as it was designed for young people. Secondly, it is immoral to move a young person to an adult jail where they will be sexually brutalized and picked on in a way that they will never recover from. So I am committed to those principles, and those will not change.
Judge Morris Reed.
Thank you for the question. You said this is our last question?
No, it's not the last question. This is my last.
Okay.
To my brother Aeneas.
I tried to think of situations that would require such a drastic action, and I thought of that the biggest drug importation case in the state's history. 200 tons of cocaine from Bogota, Colombia, 98% pure, street value, $50 million to move it off the docks in Colombia to get it into Louisiana territorial waters. If I had a young man who engineered such a cargo coming into the United States, I think I would give it some serious consideration to treat him as an adult for purposes of a trial. Or on the other hand, if he was a Timothy McVeigh-like, and he blew up the a federal building and killed as many people as McVeigh did, I would have to look at that. He would be a mass murderer. I certainly would have to give it some serious consideration. But you understand that if we use those cases as a litmus test, we have never had a Black juvenile in the state of Louisiana to come anywhere near those type of offenses. Yet this parish has a notable distinction of prosecuting more juveniles as adults than any other parish in the state. Is that because we got the largest minority population in Orleans Parish? Or using the multiple bills, sending defendants to prison for stealing T-shirts out of a local Winn-Dixie? We've used a multiple bill in New Orleans more than any other prosecutor in the state. Is that because we have the largest minority population in the state? I would never resort to prosecuting a kid as an adult. And that's part of the mentality that's been carried over from the plantation days. And unfortunately, the prosecutors have succeeded to that office, have just carried on that type of tradition. I plan to break the cycle.
Thank you. Judge Hunter.
Yeah, Morris is right. Look, in my 23 years on the bench, in the cases that were transferred to me, none of those kids should have been there. And when those cases were resolved in my section of court, I made sure when those kids were found guilty of, they pled guilty, that I sent them to a facility where they could receive their GED and learn a skilled trade. The youth offender program and specifically in Dixon Correctional Center. You know, I'm not going to transfer any kids 16 and under. And I believe kids who are accused of crimes should stay in juvenile court. And I hope and pray that we don't have a situation for a kid who's over 16 who commits a horrendous crime where I would even have to consider to send that kid or try that kid as an adult. But like Morris said, you know, in his time as a judge, his time as a police officer, my time as a judge for 23 years, I've never had or even heard of a case in which a juvenile or a kid should have been transferred to adult court and not had that case stay in juvenile court, well, where the services and resources can be made available to that young person.
Yes, and now Judge Landrum.
Thank you. And so my rule is, as a general rule, we are going to treat kids as kids and juveniles as juveniles and handle those cases in juvenile court. However, if there is an exception that as the chief public safety officer in the city of New Orleans, as the district attorney, where public safety is an issue, the closer that child is to being an adult, 18, and the most violent of the circumstance, then I may have to consider the juvenile transfer. And I'm not saying that I would, I'm saying that I may have to. However, I would never advocate for any child to be placed in the adult jail. In fact, as a judge in criminal district court, I was very instrumental in sitting down with the juvenile court judges and discussing with them about keeping all of the kids in the juvenile facility, recognizing that in no way is that ever beneficial to any child to be placed in an adult facility.
Thank you, guys. Brother Aeneas.
Thank you. It's a topic now, charging and sentencing, that hits home for me again. My dad's brother was sentenced to Angola for life for distribution of heroin. I was fortunate enough and blessed to get him out of jail a year before he passed away. So therefore, there are a number of elderly citizens still incarcerated who are no longer a threat to society. Let's talk about reducing the amount of time people spend in prison based on the charges and sentences the district attorney's office seeks. Over the past 40 years, criminal sentencing has become increasingly disconnected from promoting public safety. Prosecutors have used extreme sentences such as minimum mandatory penalties and sentence enhancements to send people to prison for decades. The result is a massive system of incarceration, which research reveals serves little measurable crime-reducing purposes and causes substantial harm to individual, family members, and communities it affects. District attorneys have a unique opportunity to affect the outsized prison or oversized prison and jail population by addressing incarceration of people convicted of both serious and minor offenses. Because we're wrapping up our time, if you would be very succinct with your answers. The first of two questions: a lot of reform proposals are focused on misdemeanors and low-level felony offenders. But do you plan to responsibly reduce the length of the time people are incarcerated for more serious offenses? If so, what specific steps will you take to do that? Judge Landrum.
Thank you. Yes, and I think that in all cases, in nonviolent cases, our goal is going to be alternatives to incarceration first. And so that is the first specific step that I would take, looking at what alternatives that link people to the services that they need, which would link them to the root causes of criminal activity. What we know is that criminal activity generally is a byproduct of something else, whether it be substance abuse issues, mental health issues, or issues that are related to poverty, housing, jobs, lack of education. And so it is going to be important in nonviolent cases to seek every and all alternative to incarceration and link people to those services so that we can then start dealing with those root issues and reduce recidivism. You know, I'll say this to you, Aeneas, I know we're short on time, but one of my very best friends, her father was incarcerated and initially given a life sentence for a heroin charge as well. And so, you know, for the 25 plus years that I knew her, I'd never met her dad. And within the last 3 years, he was released from jail. And so I understand, personally, that story as well, and recognize that we have over-incarcerated for far too long for people who are not criminal, and he suffered from a substance abuse problem. And no one ever gave him the link to that, to helping him solve that. Instead, he was given a life sentence. And so we have been doing this the wrong way, and it is now time to change how we do business and treat our communities and our citizens better.
Thank you. Judge Reed?
When I was on the bench in 1996, a study was done, and they were able to trace that up to 80% of the individuals being prosecuted were somewhat drug related, either as victims, robberies that was drug connected or what have you. 80%. So narcotic trafficking was the central driving force, defining criminality in our community. The last we checked, back in the late 90s, there was one white defendant who was serving a life sentence for narcotics, and I think his sentence was commuted. He was released. So at the time I left the bench, all those who had gotten life for distribution of heroin were black defendants, black offenders. So I think it was racially. One can conclude comfortably that it was racially driven, the multiple sentence. And we know what President candidate Biden has admitted to, that he was wrong to push the omnibus crime bill because it really increased a large number of folks going to prison for drugs. So I'm against mandatory maximum sentences. As I said, I witnessed a case where a kid went to prison for life in his 30s for stealing his last offense was stealing 2 T-shirts out of a Winn-Dixie store, and his first and second offense was simple possession of heroin. So I'm not going to perpetuate that system, which is, in my opinion, is racially based. So we're going to find some alternatives to incarceration. Okay.
Thank you, Judge Reed. Judge Hunter?
Thanks, Aeneas. Look, I'm not going to use a habitual offender statute or mandatory minimums for nonviolent offenses. And Judge Landrum was right. If you look in that person's jacket, their history, it many times is a behavior disorder or there's a drug addiction. And so we're going to deal with that at the very beginning and not wait until they've committed 3 or 4 felonies regarding it. And look, as a judge, over my 23 years, I have, in nonviolent offenses in which there was a mandatory minimum, issue a sentence less than the mandatory minimum. Now, I was reversed 99% of the time by the appeals court, but I wasn't afraid to do the right thing and not send someone and not be part of sending someone to prison for a very long time on a nonviolent offense because of the habitual offender statute. And so I'm going to continue that, and that's going to be my policy as the next district attorney as well.
Thank you. City Councilor Williams.
I want to say this as clearly as I can, and it might cost me some votes, but I didn't get in this to make friends. I got in this to overhaul the system. The American legal system, the New Orleans legal system is racist. It was born out of white supremacy. Today, it may not be about prosecutors or police using racial epithets. It's bigger than that. The city's prosecutorial practices and culture have been major contributors to racial disparities in case outcomes, incarceration rates, housing insecurity, unemployment, and underemployment. It is about the legally sanctioned systems that perpetuate these inequities in how law and order is administered. And it is large scale, as you described, Mr. Williams, and small scale. More poor, black, and brown and beige people are over-policed, over-prosecuted, overcharged, overbilled, over-incarcerated, from traffic to misdemeanors to felonies. So I will not use the habitual offender law at all, because it has, America has given longer sentences than any other country with no public safety benefits. So the length of sentence is not tied to public safety. So I will not use the habitual offender law. In fact, I spent my career fighting it. I will continue to do that, and I will use my conviction integrity unit to look back at some of these long sentences that people are serving in Angola. I will look at non-unanimous jury convictions and give them another shot. I will go forward and look backwards as it relates to our harsh sentencing measures.
Thank you. And by the way, before I turn it over to Demario, that uncle name is Leroy, and he was a brilliant, well-read man, and he ended up mentoring a number of the young people who came in Angola like he did. Take it over, Demario.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Thank you all for this discussion this afternoon. We are running low on time, so we're going to move directly to closing statements from the candidate. And we're not able to get to some of the questions. There were some really good questions in the Q&A. And so one of them that I was particularly intrigued in, they asked if any or all of you would be willing to publicly share any data or policies that you've been a part of, since all of you guys have so much background in the criminal justice space. And so maybe you can tie that up in your tie that into your last and closing 60 seconds. And we'll begin with you, City Councilor Williams.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. And thank you all for really just weighing in on this, what I think is the most important race that's going to be happening in the city of New Orleans. For more than 20 years, I've been fighting for people's rights in this city. As a criminal defense lawyer, and also working pro bono for the Innocence Project to get people off of death row that were innocent out of Angola, as a judge in 2003, and as your city council president. Today, everybody is talking about progressive reforms. But this moment in history, this campaign demands that you ask all of these folks, how hard have they fought for reform in their lives? I have written legislation that is already reforming the criminal legal system, wrote the legislation to decriminalize marijuana in the city, wrote the municipal bail reform legislation, created public-facing dashboards so the public can grade out papers 24/7 about who's arrested, how many people are in jail, what bonds have been paid. I led this city to be the first city in the country to invest in early childhood education, $1.5 million. I've worked with all system actors, Vera, MacArthur, to reduce jail population. I'm the only candidate that believes that decarceration of our system needs to be a policy goal. I was the only one to challenge Leon Canizero when he was committing all sorts of atrocities in that legal system. Real reform, bringing real change is not easy. You lose friends, you might get indicted, you might get in trouble, you might get bad things said about you in the press, but just like I fought to take down those monuments, Robert E. Lee and Jeff Davis, there is no bigger monument to racism than the criminal legal system. And that is the next monument that needs to come down. You can go to Run with Jason, and you can look at, there's a list of all the things I've done in the past, either by news stories or other accounts, to see what my record for reform is. I'm not done bringing it. I ask for your vote. I'm number 10 for.
Judge Reed.
Oh, how long do I have? 1 minute? 60 seconds?
Yes.
Oh, thank you very much. I really appreciate you all. And, you know, since we all were African Americans, I felt comfortable having this type of discourse. You know, we were promised, slaves were promised at emancipation 40 acres and a mule that they didn't get by General Sherman and General Grant. Maybe had they received that, they would have been able to afford to put up a property bond if one of their loved ones or if he or she was arrested. But we didn't get that, and that put us at a disadvantage economically. So we have to think about that, how Black folks have been disenfranchised since slavery and put in this position where we can be taken advantage of in the criminal justice system where it's just us. In court, in jail, in traffic court, municipal court, in New Orleans, it's 95% just us. I don't know what happened to the white offenders, but they don't make it to the building at Tulane and Broad, our criminal courts building. And I want to change that because the system has to become more racially diverse. And the reason why someone asked the question at the beginning, where's the white candidates? They saw the handwriting on the wall with the Black Lives Matter movement. And when the last DA, who was Italian, started arresting mothers in domestic violence cases because they refused to come in and testify in his cases, he started treating them as defendants because he couldn't make cases against the offenders. They knew there was going to be a problem with a Caucasian being elected this time, but they haven't lost interest. We have to look at who are we aligning ourselves with to perpetuate the system. because they haven't given up on the system. I think they're lurking in the background, wanting to control the next DA from vicariously, if you will. So we have to be vigilant about that and make sure that the person we put in office has the independence, does not have the type of alliances that's going to tie their hands and not be able to speak to the issues that plague the disadvantaged community. Because no DA in that office in the next 6 years will be able to serve two masters, the community as a whole, and those who like to perpetuate the management and control of the criminal justice system in this town. Keep the bodies going to CCC, Community Correctional System. Keep the individuals who profit off of our incarceration and misery going. Keep those who profit off the drug distribution and the weapon distributions and the black-on-black homicides in our community perpetuated. We have to be vigilant and look at the alliances and make sure that we bring these the next DA back to our community over and over again to do a test on that progress and find out what they're doing and get ready for the next election. Or get ready for a recall if they're not doing what they promised to do and they're just perpetuating the system. Thank you very much for so much for y'all for this opportunity to speak with you and share ideas on these important issues.
Thank you, Judge. Next, we'll hear from Judge Landrum.
Thank you, and thank you all for this opportunity this afternoon. You know, I stepped away from my job as a judge because I knew that we were faced with a critical time to make critical decisions and reform this criminal justice system and the district attorney's office. And so I knew it was imperative to have someone who not only had the experience, but who had the knowledge, the strength, the courage to step forward and get this job done. And that is why I entered this race. You know, I have the experience of serving both as a judge and as an assistant district attorney. And so I uniquely know the relationship that our community needs to see between the district attorney's office and our court system in order to prioritize violent crime and to make the decisions we need to make on low-level offenders and low-level cases so that we can seek alternatives to incarceration. You know, I know you asked the question about data and would we be willing to share that? My work as the chief judge in criminal district court in reducing the jail's population and leading and spearheading the ROR program is written in data. And so I would very well share that, but more importantly, going forward, I want to share every bit of the data that this office collects on our work with the New Orleans community. That is the only way that we will be able to heal our community and heal the relationship between the office and the community. We have to use transparency as a tool for justice. And so I stand by that and will be transparent in every bit of work that we do. More importantly, I am the only candidate in this race that has ever prosecuted a case in criminal district court, who has advocated for any victim or any witness in criminal district court, and who as a judge and as a prosecutor has led in everything that I've done with efficiency and integrity. And so that is what we need and deserve in our district attorney's office. And that is the type of district attorney that I will be for the citizens of New Orleans. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And lastly, Judge Hunter.
Yeah, I want to thank the Players Coalition for putting us together and bringing us together and letting the people know what our views are. And Demario, the simple answer to your question is yes, we'll be transparent. You know, we have in this election the opportunity to change how the district attorney's office has operated over the last 50 years. You know, I protected the community as a police officer, and I held police officers accountable for misconduct. You know, I created a reentry court program that was recognized by the American Bar Association that reduces and prevents crime. You know, and I made controversial decisions, you know, regardless of political consequences, since I've been on the bench. I was a fair judge, and I wasn't afraid to do the right thing. And I would do the same thing as the district attorney. But you know, this election is not about us. It's about you and what kind of criminal justice system you want to live under. You know, one that is fair or unjust, one that can be effective or chaotic, one that's right or wrong. And so I'm asking for your support. I'm asking for your votes. My ballot number is number 101 that you just want to remember. And again, I want to thank the Players Coalition for sponsoring this event this afternoon.
Thank you. With that, we conclude the discussion. Thank you to each of the candidates for attending, and thank you all for coming and participating. And more importantly, for being interested voters. Continue to engage and be sure to vote. Early voting starts in a few days on October the 16th.
All right.
And the election is on November the 3rd.
I don't know if you can hear me. My website is morrisreed4da.com. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, any
Demario?
website, social plug, y'all feel free to do that.
All right. And,
Okay.
my number is number 103. All right.
And
Thank you very
Demario,
much.
I wanted to
Enjoy.
thank all of you guys as well, and also bring to remembrance Harrell Park, which many of you all may know.
Yeah.
Coach Mims, the late Coach Mims, protected a lot of us when we were away from our parents. And because this position is so important, there will be people, young people, because the parks are now shutting down. Harrell is still vibrant, but a number of them have shut down.
Yeah.
So many of these young people that would have been safe and burned all their energy in the parks may end up now before you. So remember these faces. Remember Demario. Remember what he shared. If his coach wasn't able to bail him out in college, my parents, Coach Mims, Harrell Park, many of my friends who graduated from college, we wouldn't be where we are today. So thank you all. This is an important time, and it's a time that God has saw fit for all of us to be here, because he's placed in us the ability to cause true changes. God bless you. Thank you so much, Demario.
Thanks,
Thank you for co-hosting and this entire candidacy. Wish you guys the best.
Thank
God
you.
bless
Appreciate it. Appreciate it, Aeneas.
Thank
You
you.
too, Demario. Appreciate it.
Richard Lee Park, Playground, Flood Street in the Lower Ninth Ward.
Marshall Falk, my teammate.
There you
Yes,
go.
sir.
All right.
Yes, sir.
All right.